if you're doing something for other people, it becomes a recognition and adoration, and you're doing something for other people. Again, it's very similar to what you were doing as a rugby player, right? You're doing all this stuff really as a spectator. I'm sure that the drive wouldn't have quite been there if there wasn't hundreds of thousands of people around watching, right?
Of course, yeah.
So you become a charity ambassador. At what point was this happening? Was this post rugby? Was this post you acknowledging this?
So it happened probably during, right? Because I think that that progress, like when I was a young kid, when I was a young kid, up to like, I don't know, 10 to 14, 15 or whatever it was, my motive, my drivers were probably actually, I just love being around people and I love playing the game, and and then it evolved, and I suddenly, all these things that were missing in my life because my dad left and they had an ugly divorce and whatever else, and we had a sort of unsettled home. Suddenly all these other things started to become a bit of a fixation, and driving, and just like everything, it becomes a habit. Habit breeds more perpetuity, and by the time I got to like 20, I'd had 10 years of this seeking adoration and fixation on support and everything else like that. It then became a drug, and I didn't know anything about it. And you're right. I then, in the early stages of my rugby career, decided to be a charity ambassador for a couple of charities, and turn up and open a few shops and whatever else like that. As an England rugby captain, whatever else. Yep. And now reflecting on it, you're probably, there's definitely a philanthropic side to me, but I would say those drivers are also driven by, this is more recognition, this is more praise, this is more sort of putting me in the in the shop window or whatever else. And then when I retired, I went to a Sevens World Cup, got injured. I was 29, and at that point they told me, look, we don't know what's the matter with you, it's all over. And that, for me, particularly, let's call myself like an addict to this outcome that was coming from this game of rugby. At that time, I wasn't cognizant of this, but that was a hammer blow. That was a disaster. I was like, this is all I've known all my life. This is all I'm good at. This is how I get my self-validation in life. This is how I get my recognition. This is how I get my purpose and feel on all my self-worth. And now all of this has just gone. Literally I walked off the field. Well, I didn't walk off the field. They carried me off the field. They said I'd severed the nerve in my calf. And within 3 hours, they said, we don't know what's the matter. You're going to have to retire. They pulled my 3-year contract out. And
they actually told you that? They said you were going to have to retire 3 hours after an injury?
3 hours after injury, yeah.
Wow.
3 hours. I mean, I'd had a few problems with my calf building up to this, so we'd sort of been on and off.
I recall it.
But this was the one where they went, sorry. They basically gave up, right? They basically said, we're out of ideas. We give up. There's nothing else that we think we can do. So actually, you just retire. And it still annoys me to this day. But that was that was the outcome, right? So they said
a horrendous bedside manner, right?
Yeah. So
was it the physio? Who's it told you this?
Yeah, the doctor and the physio. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. And what was even more frustrating was that it was we won't get into that, but there was the whole political. I'd been to see Kevin a lot, and Kevin has said, look, you need to do this form of treatment. This is what it is. I know. And the doctor refused to acknowledge that, and it was mainly because he didn't like Kevin, and as a result of that, he wouldn't listen and wanted to go off down this path, which was ultimately the wrong path. And then we had.
Sorry, mate, lost you there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Lost you there for a second.
So before the internet kindly disrupted us, I think. So that was a really tough moment for me, right? I was going through this process where you put trust and faith in sort of some of the medical people that are in the infrastructure. There was definitely a difference of opinion, and well, being honest and being blunt, Kevin Lidlow was right. He was right all the way along. And my one disappointment was I didn't have the conviction to say no, like we're doing what Kevin said to the medics within England. And the reason why I didn't was they were the purse strings who were ultimately going to be paying for my care and my treatment. And they wanted to go a certain way. And the result was I had an operation, and that changed the entire layout of my calf. And it was never the same again from that point on. So anyway, I'd come off the field after having done all of this process to try and get back to play.
And this was post-operation, right?
Yeah, this is post.
This was after you had the operation. You got back to playing, rehabbed, blah blah blah. But then then inevitably, because it hadn't been restructured properly and hadn't been treated properly, you've got this injury that has transpired into them turning around to you and saying, that's your career over in literally like a couple of hours, right?
Yeah, I got carried off the field, and then within about an hour, they sort of said, look, we don't know what the hell this is anymore. You know, I think this could be all over. And then 3 hours later, I sat down with Ben Ryan. He said, look, this isn't great, and I think we're going to have to pull your contract that we've put there because we can't contract.
And this is for the sevens.
This is for the sevens, yeah. So my plan was to go to the World Cup that year in Moscow, the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow the year after, and then go to the Olympics in Rio in 2016. And at that point, I would have been 32, 33, and I'd hang up my boots. That was the sort of plan.
That's. I mean, for a player of your, position, et cetera, 32 is kind of.
Yeah, that would have been. I would have made it. I would have just made it, but I'd been at the end. I mean, particularly on a sevens field, I'd have been at the end of the line. I mean, I might have gone and played somewhere else, but I'd had this sort of dream moment of like end at the Olympics in Rio. Great way to go out as an Olympian, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and that was the first year they played rugby, wasn't it? In
however
2016,
long,
wasn't it?
Yeah, since the 1900s or something like that. So anyway, and obviously that was a bit of a curveball of like, well, shit, hold on. Everything I've ever known, all my identity, all my value and purpose, all my drivers, all my recognition, et cetera, is in this game, and now it's gone. And also, I didn't think like that at the time, but now looking back, that's exactly what happened.